Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Hello and welcome, friends. I am back from the Dhamma trip, doing I had the opportunity to do some teaching in Turkey and also in Sri Lanka. And today, with our online Buddhist meditation community, I'd like to talk about the importance of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, and a little bit about what these terms mean to me, and maybe what as well taking refuge has meant to me in my life. It's always good to start back at the beginning. No better place to continue than the beginning, I think. When I was a young person, I didn't know about Buddhism, and looking back, it's a little bit strange for me to imagine being a person who doesn't know about Buddhism. But it's for sure from my experiences with my family and from my experiences with the culture and the society in America, I had no idea about Buddhism. I'd never heard about anything called Buddhism in my early life. And finding Buddhism for me came about because of the absolute disaster that was my life, right? My life was a nightmare. I was going really in a bad direction in terms of my mental, physical, and verbal actions, and also in terms of the side effect from those actions, kind of the instability of my mind, and the sense that there was something in me that was out of control, and something in me that not just hated myself wouldn't be enough to describe it. It was almost like that my hate, my anger, my greediness, my delusion had taken its own form, right? Like I was haunted by a ghost of myself. And at a certain point, as my life fell apart, as my mind fell apart, I said, well, the only thing I can do is leave, right? The only thing that I can do is try to run away from myself and my life. And what that looked like was a mentally unstable teenager starting to travel in the United States, going and looking for something, looking for freedom, looking for getting out of this prison of my mind, my life, my family. Right? It was all a prison for me. I didn't see any way out. So I said, okay, I've just got to leave. And upon that leaving, and a little bit before that leaving as well, I think, I discovered this notion of spirituality. And I don't know, I didn't know what spirituality was, but I heard this guy Alan Watts talking, and I saw a book from Eckhart Tolle, and someone else gave me a book called, I think it's called Hardcore Zen or something like that. The guy who wrote that book, he's still active. He has a YouTube channel. I watch that sometimes. But it's shown something to me, that there was not just that I could figure out my problems or solve my problems, but that my problem was actually a deeper problem than I thought it was. It was deeper than my personal problem. It was deeper than the problem of the story of my life. And somehow in that point that there was a deeper problem also brought up that there was a deeper solution, right? That there was a fuller solution, that not only could I deal with my problems, but I could be free from everything. And that the teachers that I was listening to at that time, like Alan Watts, Eckhart Tolle, some others maybe Ram Dass, was that it could happen now, right? That I could find that freedom, I could find that enlightenment now. And that really inspired me because my mind, my heart, my life, I was so confused. I was so lost, and I didn't have anything to take refuge in. I certainly couldn't take refuge in myself. I didn't feel like I could take refuge in my family. I didn't feel like I could take refuge in having money or getting an education. It didn't feel like there was anything that I could take refuge in, that I could trust in, that I could rely on, that I could go to for freedom. That's what I needed. That's what I wanted, was freedom. So I went around, I had different spiritual experiences. I stayed for, maybe it was a few months. I mean, time. What is time anyway? But time's a little bit of a funny thing. A few weeks, a few months, I don't know. But I stayed with this Native American church community in Northern California, in like Mendocino County. And I went to some of these tribal, shamanic, Native American church meetings where we all sat in a teepee together overnight, and it was very formal, and there was a shaman and a fireman and a water woman, and people would play the drums and do these chantings and things, and go to sweat lodges as well. And it really did reach me very deeply. I had some change in my ego or change in my persona. I felt some depth of experience that gave me this window to freedom. And I remember one of the last meeting I went to, it was very, very intense. And I've always been someone, I have this ideal in me of really taking things to their limit. Going to this place of almost exhaustion, desperation, just really putting the head to the grindstone with as much grit as possible and holding it there as long as possible to kind of burn out, right? Burn out all these parasites and viruses of the mind, right? All of this non-practical, complicated thinking, all of these delusions. And I was a very delusional person, more so in the past, but still so now. So, I remember at the end of that ceremony, and I just went out and I went to kind of walked a little bit and went to this vista. Maybe I had to pee or something. It was this big, wide open vista. And I just started crying and wailing and, just begging to be purified. Begging, some kind of mother spirit or something, because I wanted to be free from myself. I wanted to be free from my traumas. I wanted to be free from my coping mechanisms to those traumas, right? I wanted to be free from the hurt that I had caused myself and that I had caused others. I was trying to get rid of my karma. That's what that kind of experience was about, looking back at it. So I had all these spiritual experiences, and I went to deep places in myself that were positive. But and then also I went to the Hare Krishnas. I was with the Hare Krishnas for a while and doing Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Doing that a lot, you'll get to some deep places too. You go into your concentration. And still, I remember I was there for 2 weeks, and at a certain point, I just started falling apart, and I didn't, I was getting a lot of concentration, but my mind was still very unstable. And actually, that doesn't work, especially when you have a tendency towards an unstable mind, or like a tendency towards delusion. And that's what a lot of us. Hold on, friends. Hello, Tita. Yes.
Hi, Bhante. Donato's here and says he can't see the girl.
Okay,
Who's
let
driving.
me call. I'm gonna call them right now. Okay.
All right then.
All
Yeah,
right.
call me back.
Okay.
Bye. Bye.
That's some temple duties, because we have some people coming to the temple. One of our Sangha members coming to the temple as well. Let's see here. Chesh, are you here? One of our long-term. Oh, okay. All set. We're all set. So, I was having these intense spiritual experiences, and um, I was really digging into my ego and digging into my sufferings. But when I went back, kind of with my tail between my legs to my family, because, you can be a spiritual person all you want, but it doesn't mean you have money, right? It doesn't mean you have a good place to stay or what have you. So I went back to my family, and my mom got me this job, because she used to do apartment management, so she got me an apartment and a job, and my mental health just fell apart, even after all these spiritual experiences and stuff. And I didn't know how to take care of myself, and I didn't know how to stop this free fall into suffering. I didn't know how to stop this free fall into being beholden to my traumas and being beholden to my fear. Didn't know what to do. So I was fortunate that I reached out to some meditation centers, Buddhist informed meditation centers. And when I was 20 years old, I wound up going to this Zen Buddhist meditation center in New Mexico. It's a well-known place called Upaya Zen Center. And this must have been about 2014, 2015. I was 20 years old. And I really, people have to consider that I was not a good case for that kind of system, for that kind of center, right? If I would have been more upfront with that center about the intensity of my difficulties that I was going through or had been going through recently, I'd calmed down a little bit before I was applying to these places. For sure, I wouldn't have been able to get into that place. I wouldn't have been able to go there, because they are not. Most of these meditation centers and meditation groups are not. They're not prioritizing to deal with people who are who have issues with instability. But somehow I got in there, and I had my first sustained experience with community. And I had my first sustained experience with meditation. I had my first sustained experience with Buddhism, right? The tradition of Buddhism. And I stayed there for a year. We have some. Do we have some technical issues here on Discord? Hello? Okay. Hearing me fine. That's good. So I don't mean to, I certainly don't want to kind of attach to this story about my identity. But I think it's important to relay and convey, how I got to this point in my path. So going to stay at this Zen meditation center for a year was extremely intense. There was a lot of suffering in me, and I forced myself to practice meditation. I forced myself to stay at that place, to follow the schedule, and the conditions kind of supported me to do that. Intensive meditation retreats, listening to Buddhist teachings, and being in community. Being around people who were more experienced than on the path than I was. Much more experienced, not just more experienced, but were successful in their life as business people, successful in their life as, their social life or what have you. And I never had as much success in my social life since I became a monk. I traveled around a lot. I grew up in an unstable way. I never stayed at one home or one house for, 5 years or something like that. It's always going from place to place. And I think a lot of people can get caught up in the high-mindedness of Buddhist teachings, right? The high-mindedness of no self, the high-mindedness of, everything is emptiness, or everything is impermanent. But for me, Buddhism starts with authenticity and sacrifice. Starts with a willingness to be vulnerable, a willingness to be completely human, a willingness to be completely exposed. And not exposed in this way of blaming or shaming or praising someone because they do something good, or pushing someone down because they do something bad, or, this is your fault, this happened because of this, you're like this, you're like that. But it's more opening our heart, opening our mind, and being around other people that are also open enough to receive that and to share that with us, this opening. So the Buddha, that experience led me to have more stability in my life, and then that led me to being, successful in making money and living in Seattle and, having all these things. And then that led me to say, hey, this is not my freedom, this is not my path, giving all that up, and then making my way to Thailand and becoming a monk, and that led to here. staying at monasteries, finding my teacher in Myanmar, fully taking refuge in the Sangha. So let's start with the Sangha. What is the Sangha? What is the Sangha, dear friends? Okay, Lauren says it's a community of unified purpose. Well, what if a community's unified purpose is to harm others? So that doesn't quite work. The more that we can get specific about this path, about our experience, which means the more closely we can look, the more direct our experience is, the more benefit that goes along with it, whatever that experience might be. Okay, Nicole says, I feel it's a spiritual like family that helps each other and suffering within their community and outside of it together. Maybe spiritual isn't the best word. fellow practitioners to help us keep returning to the path of skillful and wholesome Buddhist practices. I think that's good. Community of practitioners who are on the path to end suffering and get enlightened. Bree says, I also see it a lot like an external net or web of accountability. Well, something that I've been looking at and digesting recently is that ultimately we're in a practical situation, right? Ultimately, this is a practical situation. And we may be able to speak about the state of mind of the Buddha, or we may be able to imagine about the state of mind of someone who has kind of some degree of enlightenment, right? But the question is, because this directly relates to Sangha from the Buddhist definition, the question is that the same? Is someone who has actually experienced a particular degree of enlightenment the same as your normal, everyday, average practitioner? Even a decent practitioner, but they haven't experienced, don't have any experience on the path of enlightenment. They haven't gotten enlightened really in any major way, which means that, for example, they still hold on to an identity view, right? They still believe in a deep way that they are someone. And how do we work with these different levels that people may be on related to what we're interested in and what we're involved with, right? So let's say we're very interested in spirituality, Buddhism, enlightenment, and someone is more enlightened than us. Well, how do we work with that? How do we digest that? We might not like that person, right? We might not like the person that's more enlightened than us. And so, or we may like them, we may not. We may want to follow them or support them, or we may not, right? But we encounter these kinds of things in our spiritual path. It's just like if we were an arm wrestling group, if Nicole was absolutely obsessed with arm wrestling, right, with female arm wrestling. Usually men and women compete separately in professional arm wrestling or arm wrestling in general. So imagine if Nicole was obsessed with arm wrestling, considered themselves to be a very strong arm wrestler, but then encountered an arm wrestler that was much stronger than them. But for enlightenment or for spirituality, etc. How do we work with that? How do we look at that? How do we think about those kinds of things? I'm curious because I've been wondering about that recently. And that's been a big part of my path in taking refuge in the Sangha and taking refuge in the Buddha as well. That I see that these certain people, for me it's monks that I've met, who are more enlightened than me. You know, I would want to say that. I would want to express that. So how do I relate? How do I work with those kinds of situations? Looks like Lauren's typing. And anyone who's here, please consider if you have something to share about this. You can also use your microphone too. Because there are, and there will be, at least in a practical sense, okay, there will be people that we encounter, hopefully, right? Keep your fingers crossed that there will be people we encounter that are farther along on the path than we are. So how do we deal with that? And this question has a special importance for people who are actively on the path. This isn't really relevant for spiritual spectators. We're not talking about crystals here. We're not talking about chakras. We're not talking about um, magic spells or things like that. We're talking about degrees of enlightenment, degrees of freedom. So it's people who are involved in this path, who are involved in this practice, and concerned with the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. This is especially relates to what the Sangha is from a Buddhist context.
Can I share?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, for me is detaching, in the presence of whoever I'm talking to. Watching a movie, not attaching to the person or what they're saying, or just looking from from inside out, like a movie. I can't explain myself. I've been meditating for 40 years, and I've been healing a lot of trauma, and I had to learn. I learned to detach. I learned to be in the presence of somebody and not attached to the outcome. And when I do get triggered, and when I do get disturbed, I go to meditation and I process. I breathe, I let go. I breathe and let go. Sometimes it takes me a day, sometimes it takes me 2-3 days. And then I'm back aligned again. And like you have mentioned before, sitting with the discomfort. Whatever is going on with me has nothing to do with the other person. So when I do that breathing, I usually get in touch with me and what is bothering me. I journal too, so I journal what works for me. But yeah. Thank you for being here and speaking. I always get a lot out of you.
So that is the way you apply your mind, listening to anyone or experiencing anyone, regardless of if they're further along or less along on the path than you are.
Yes. Yes. And with love. Always with love. Unconditional love, looking at them as a human being. It doesn't matter where they're at. I don't know if I'm making sense.
Well, no, I think there's a lot of wisdom in what you're sharing, but the last point of not mattering where they're at, for me, it seems to be very important to know where people are at, either as a student or as a teacher or a prospective student. I see that coming up for me.
I understand what you're saying. It's like I know where they're at. Like I know where they're at, but it's like I don't judge it. I don't, I just give whatever they're ready to get out of me. I don't force or tell anybody where they need to be. It's like I have to be the representation of what they want. Maybe I'm not understanding the question.
Maybe I'm not understanding the answer. Okay, it looks like some other comments here. Can you read aloud the people who make their comments?
Are you talking to me?
Well, no, just the people who wrote down their comments. I don't know if they can speak them aloud or not. If they can use their microphone.
Okay.
I'm able to, if that's okay.
Sure.
I was just saying that I have had to learn through my life that I can learn from people whether I like them or not. Everyone is different, and they have different experiences that have brought them to where they are at the time that I might encounter them. So whether I like them or not still doesn't matter, because it gives me the opportunity to observe and to apply what I see and what may be helpful to keep me mindful and aware and in the present moment, not maybe if I have an unpleasant interaction, not being accusatory or disrespectful or abrupt or having to force my opinion on it. It's just a matter of every interaction that I have with someone is an opportunity for me to learn, and my responsibility is how I will respond, and that response then in turn provides a learning opportunity for others about me, and that can be positive, it could be negative, it could be neutral, but I just have to decide that when I have an interaction with someone, whether it's good or otherwise, I need to look for every opportunity that I can to stay focused and mindful in the moment, and to put down my need to correct or my need to inform and receive what I can learn from the situation.
That's beautiful. It just brings up for me that one, how subtle the elements of our communication can be, right? So that subtle aggression or that subtle, I like how you put it, kind of trying to inform someone about something, trying to force that view without it being requested. And also that, for me as someone who can interact with a lot of people in my, in my work, in my sharing, but see, that's a tough point, right? Because if I want to share with someone something that's beneficial to me, something that's informed, that I believe is informed, so maybe how can I share that? Right? I want to share that, but to take on their, let's say nonsense, and to approach it from this completely holistic point of view, right? Like, explain from them. That's really difficult, right? And so there, I think it's probably true. Like, it's more true to know how to let go and to disengage, because it's not just their mind that's going to be affected by that, but it's also my mind, that frustration, that tension, that they don't get it, or that they're kind of going around in circles. But I either have to engage with that from a place of compassion and wisdom, or I have to let that go, let that process on its own.
Yes, I think also if I choose only to model what I hope for others, they will decide what they do with it. But my responsibility is also not to force what I think is important on others. And sometimes when we feel, if we have a difficult topic or we feel heated about something, I have to just shut my mouth, because my mouth can destroy everything that my intentions are trying to establish. And if my goal is to share compassion and love and empathy for people, to meet them where they are, I got to keep my mouth shut sometimes, and that's a lot easier to say than it is to do for me.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Anyone else?
Okay, I'm going to speak just from the heart. If someone's further along the path than me, the spiritual path, I kind of have some expectations from them for some reason. I kind of expect them to subtly guide me, maybe, or they possess some kind of wisdom that I lack. So that's my initial expectation, or my mindset, my frame of thinking.
Well, I think that can be useful. I think that can certainly be useful. But expectation and generosity, how do these two go together? Right? Because if we expect someone to teach us or to guide us, it's not just that we expect them to teach us or to guide us, but we expect them to do that in a particular way, right? According to our, if we're aware of ourselves, our misunderstandings, our delusions, right? So maybe pinpointing that there's someone you want to learn from, there's someone you want to get support from, and then approaching from a place of generosity, or from a place of reverence and humbleness, because you want to get some training, you want to get some direct support. So like for me, if I was in a position of a teacher and someone showed up at my door and said, hey, even if they said quite finely, hey, I want to learn, I wanted you to train me, and then I say, okay, come in, you stay here. And then the next day they're knocking on my door and saying, wake up, Bhante, why aren't you up teaching me? That's a nightmare, right? So our expectations can rule out a lot of opportunities for development. And I think also it can be very intermingled with like this colonization mindset, where we're so like, okay, this is what I expect, this is what I'm used to, and this is the gold standard. And if anything's other than that, well then, it's less valuable or less important or somehow flawed. Right? When we're not generous, we're also not willing to like sit down and learn and listen. We're not generous outwardly, and that means we're not generous inwardly, to give ourselves the space and the time to respect our own unknowing, our own not understanding, to respect our own listening faculty, our authentic faculty. And if we think that our authenticity is someone else's or some cultural, social idea of authenticity, well, what kind of authenticity is that? Okay, someone else can speak up?
I was just saying that I think by helping and showing up for others, like doing good deeds and just like, being virtuous is the best way to help yourself be more enlightened. But I think also just like listening to what they have to say and like listening to Dharma talks and things like that, it should help you, learn from this person in a way. And I mean, if you have like some resistance there, but you think they're wise, I'm not really understanding that, but I think it's more like if you learn to see, the best in others and show up for them as like a human, and don't like overextend yourself, then I feel like, you're helping your path and, you're helping theirs too, I guess. I don't know how to word that, but just being generous, I think, is like the important part to that.
Okay, Alicia on YouTube says open-mindedness, willing. Alicia on YouTube says open-mindedness, willing to be wrong, looking at it in a kind of observer way, to watch an experience, to learn and possibly unlearn, only to realize we know nothing. The only to realize we know nothing, you have to watch out for that. Because you know how to breathe, right? You know how to eat. You know how to order food. You know how to watch the stuff you like to watch. So a lot of times where spirituality can be in this realm of convincing ourselves about things, right? We give ourselves a kind of spiritual authority because we've convinced ourselves about things. Oh, I'm a monk, so of course I'm some kind of authority on spirituality. But is that actually authority? No. That's just an idea, and then just because I convince myself about that idea and then I feel a certain way because I'm convinced about that, that's not real authority. So real authority, from my side, from my understanding, is not to realize we know nothing, but it's to experience not knowing fully, brightly, clearly. And that not knowing is not grasping, right? And to get to a place of not grasping, we have to sacrifice. We have to abandon. We have to give, right? We have to give our attachments away. We have to put them down. Come back to our true home, our practice, right? So replace realizing we know nothing with practice. So I experienced when I was at Upaya Zen Center in 2014, 2015, a young 20-year-old Bhante, and doing a lot of meditation, a lot of intensive meditation, but I didn't have any virtue. I didn't have many merits. I had never done many meritorious deeds in my life, so at a certain point, I had so much concentration and so little merits, so little goodness in my heart, so little wholesomeness in my heart, ultimately. And that led to destabilization, and I can remember having panic attacks, right? Strong experiences like that. So as much as we can do good deeds, practice to live virtuously, listen to Dhamma talks, have that mindset of loving kindness, then we can go deeper and deeper into our practice, which we don't have to leave on, oh, I know nothing, right? Not to get stuck, not to leave it on, I know nothing. Because you do know. what to do and what not to do to a good degree. And it's important to practice that. So I was listening to Dhamma talk today from Ajahn Brahm, I think, or yeah, maybe it was Ajahn Brahm. Yeah, and he was talking about the three kinds of desire. I think I only remember two, but it's the the desire to get something, like to get a sensual pleasure, specifically, I think, to get sensual pleasure, right? To feel pleasantness, to feel pleasure, that desire, that craving. And then the second one, which is what we're all very aware of, right? And we usually are thinking in that kind of way, like watching, we're trying to get pleasure, trying to avoid pain physically or mentally. And then the second one is a desire for becoming. Like we want to become enlightened, we want to become more enlightened, we want to become a doctor, we want to become a more spiritual person. So craving for sensual pleasures, craving for existence, or craving for this becoming, right, this special state. And then the final one, vibhava tanha. Tanha means craving. Craving for non-existence, right? Craving to get rid of some part of our being, some part of ourself, some part of our experience. So it's quite good. It seems like in our community we don't have too much of a problem with that craving for, I want to be enlightened, I want to be more enlightened, I'm this kind of enlightenment, etc. And if anyone's not keeping up with the Bhante blog, I just got back to Italy from about a 3-week Dhamma trip. I went to Turkey and did some teaching there, and then I went to Sri Lanka and had some opportunity to visit some monasteries and do some teaching there as well. So I'm just getting back after a more than 24-hour traveling from Sri Lanka by flight and then a 9-hour train ride. So I now am back in Italy, and we will be able to do more of our live streaming activities like this to explore the great Dhamma. Any questions? I'm a little bit sleepy, but I was excited to be back and have the opportunity for us to meet and do a live stream.
Bhante, I have a question, I guess.
Okay.
Well, welcome back to Italy. I'm happy you're happy. Oh, sorry. What was I going to say? Oh yeah, I was going to ask if you also have that feeling when you're in the room, kind of pertaining to the last discussion, when you're in the room with somebody who is more enlightened than you, I guess you could say. Does it influence your practice in a way where you can almost like feel it, like your meditation is just clear, like there's almost an aura sort of in the meditation that's making it easier for you, if that makes sense? Because I don't know what it is, but like for me, there's a big difference if I'm meditating by myself or if I'm meditating with a monk. For some reason, it's much easier with a monk.
Well, not just any monk, right? Okay. Yeah. So this can be good. This can be, and it's like that, but that can also be, you could get confused by that, right? Because there's a lot of charlatans out there. And there may be charlatans that are a little bit more enlightened than us, right? It's possible. Not particularly likely, and we should practice in such a way where that kind of thing's not going to happen. We should practice seriously. We should know about the Dhamma, right? We should know about our own mind, and we should know about how our interactions with others affect our mind, right? But certainly when we are with Sangha or with community like this, someone left a comment about maybe it was Brie, a circle of accountability or something like that. Someone said that. Yeah, external net, a web of accountability. So, someone who is more enlightened, right? And we may talk more about this in the future in our meetings, because this is something I've been looking at more. The kind of levels of enlightenment that we have in Theravada Buddhism. But they can offer a level of accountability that someone who is less enlightened, and we'll put all this in quotes, cannot offer, right? Like a precision or a clarity or a authenticity of non-grasping. And then when you're with that kind of person, you can feel that. And also, I think teachers can feel that as well. Maybe when you're at a higher level, you don't as much. But like for me, I love being in community like this together because I feel that accountability, that present moment accountability where I know the members of this Sangha are here together with me in that framework of mindfulness and willing to detach. And that's such a special place. And then to explore the Dhamma together, right? That's such a precious and vital place. And that puts me in that place in my heart, and to be a facilitator or a teacher, or more or less enlightened, those are just kind of like practical points towards the ultimate. But we are a practical people. We're not arahants, so we don't speak as arahants, right? We're not anagamis, so we don't speak as anagamis. And believing in that may not be in our wheelhouse right now, those kinds of things that maybe we'll talk about more, these stages of enlightenment. And that shouldn't keep us from practicing, right? Because the Dhamma is the Dhamma that we can make use of now. It's not the Dhamma that's in some ethereal, rigid book of the Buddhist teachings that we need to believe in or subscribe to. It's the Dhamma that recognizes that there is suffering, that there's a cause of that suffering, which is grasping. We're chasing stuff all the time. We want to feel pleasure. We don't want to feel pain. It's incredible. We're not all on opiates or something like that, right? So there's a reason for that suffering, and that's our craving, that's our grasping. and that there is an ending of grasping. There's an ending of suffering. There is a freedom. There is peace. It's real. It's the real deal, right? That freedom from suffering, that peace, that total peace, that direct experience of peace that is just peace, nibbana, and that there's a path to ending suffering, and that that's what Buddhism is about, and that Buddhism is a gold standard of that path. And you can use as much or as little of it as you feel that is appropriate. But regardless of it, how you feel about it, you should practice seriously. You should have a serious spiritual practice in your life. That's what I recommend. And relationship with the Sangha. And that I saw someone translate this. They said the traditional, what Sangha means is people who have stepped onto the escalator of enlightenment, because once you reach a certain stage, then eventually you will become enlightened, right? It's kind of for sure. So it's people who have stepped onto that stage, become a sotapanna or become some degree of enlightenment. They don't have a self-view and they don't believe in their self anymore. They see through that. They can't believe in self. Things like that. So even if we're not thinking about those kinds of things, we should still practice seriously. And then we may find we get to a point in our serious practice where we want to double down or triple down, or we want the whole shebang. And then the Sangha, which is community of kind of somewhat enlightened people, or the community of monks and nuns, the monks that we know, not some kind of ethereal Sangha in, out there somewhere, but the monks that we know. And there aren't many Western monks, so there's not so much to choose from, but you can try. Find monks that you connect with. And then what supports that Sangha and is a part of that Sangha is this community of well-minded practitioners, right? Lay people on the path that are not, what is that difference? It's a deeper willingness to renounce. It's a deeper prioritization on renunciation. It's a deeper prioritization on the willingness to forsake the path of greed. It's a deeper prioritization of that in terms of renunciation and experience with it. And of course, monastic law going back, 2,600 years ago to the Buddha, and this system that's been built for monks to become real monks and to ordain. So that if we get that deeper feeling, we have a community to take refuge in that's prepared to help us to renounce. Okay, we'll leave it there for now today, dear Sangha. Maybe we finish with a happiness song, because I'm feeling a little bit happy. All right? And whether it's Theravada Buddhism or Mahayana Buddhism, let's sing a happiness song. All right, join along with me if you know this song. Happiness is here and now. I have dropped my worries. Nowhere to go, nothing to do. No longer in a hurry. Happiness is here and now. I have dropped my worries. Somewhere to go, something to do. But I don't need to hurry. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, see you soon, friends.
Bye.